Charles had lived on this land his entire life. Born in the farmhouse his grandfather built with his own hands, raised between rows of corn and beets under skies that stretched out like forever. Nothing surprised Charles anymore. Nothing changed here. That was the beauty of it. Until the earth moved. It happened just after 4 a.m. Charles would never forget the time. At first he thought it was thunder, just a storm rolling in. But when the bed jolted beneath him, when the walls began to groan and tremble, something primal took over. He jumped out of bed barefoot as the floor rippled beneath his feet. The house creaked and popped, the old beams straining like they were crying out. It wasn't thunder. It wasn't a storm. It was an earthquake. And it made no sense. This part of the country didn't get earthquakes. Tornadoes? Sure. Floods? Occasionally. But this was unnatural. As quickly as it started, it stopped. Then came the silence, heavy and wrong, the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. Charles stepped out onto the porch. The boards cracked beneath his boots. The air smelled off. Not just wet earth, but something chemical, something sharp. He scanned the fields and stopped cold. There, in the middle of his southern plot, was a wound in the land, a sinkhole. But this wasn't just collapsed dirt. It was open, like the earth had peeled back and exposed something hidden, something old, something waiting. Charles didn't waste time. He grabbed his phone and called the one person he trusted with something this strange, his best friend and neighbor, Tom. Tom arrived 20 minutes later in an old pickup, engine coughing in protest. He stepped out, looked at the hole, and didn't say a word for a long time. The sinkhole was massive, 20 feet across, at least 12 feet deep. Trees had collapsed into it, twisted like matchsticks. The soil inside was streaked with deep red veins that almost glowed under the rising sun. "What the hell is that?" Tom muttered, kneeling down. He scooped a handful of dirt and winced. "It's warm." "Shouldn't be," Charles replied. They circled to the southern edge, where the land sloped into the pit like a ramp. It didn't look like an accident. It looked like an entrance. Charles hesitated. But something pulled at him, a feeling in his gut. This wasn't just a hole in his land. This was connected to something bigger. He grabbed a flashlight from his truck. "Let's go." Tom didn't argue. The descent was slow and cautious. The soil shifted under their boots. The air grew hotter, heavier. A sulfuric stench curled into their noses, making their eyes water. It clung to their skin, their breath. At the bottom, they found it, a tunnel, 15 feet wide, 8 feet tall, cut clean through the red earth with impossible precision. The walls were lined with black, pulsing veins that shimmered under the flashlight beam. Not rock, not roots, something else. It was too perfect to be natural. As they moved deeper, the floor crunched beneath their feet. Gravel, loose dirt, debris. The tunnel wasn't untouched. Someone had been here before them. They passed twisted roots, rusted metal fragments, and something stranger. Burnt wooden beams buried in the wall. Some blackened, others splintered, and on one, partially hidden beneath charred dirt, were letters scorched into the wood. MLB.co. That's when it stopped feeling like discovery and started feeling like a warning. They kept walking. The smell grew stronger. The air thicker, pools of water collected in dips along the path, shimmering with a yellowish film that looked and smelled like oil. Then came the pipe, a rusted metal pipe, cracked and leaking a thick black sludge. It oozed down the wall like blood from a wound soaking into the earth. "This doesn't belong here," Tom said. "No," Charles agreed, "but it's been here a while." Further down they found a side alcove. More beams, more metal. The entire tunnel was braced like a mine shaft. Someone had built this. and not recently. Just beyond the alcove, a soft hum began to rise in the distance. Low, mechanical, rhythmic, the kind of sound machines make when they're working. Charles and Tom froze. Whatever this place was, it wasn't abandoned. The hum grew louder with each step, vibrating through the ground, through their boots, through their bones. They stopped. This was too big, too dangerous. They turned back, moving quickly but carefully, and that's when Charles noticed it. A puddle they had stepped through on the way in, now bubbling. Something beneath the surface hissed softly. A warning. They climbed back up and out of the sinkhole, breathless, soaked in sweat and sulfur. Their boots were coated in thick black grime, but they were out, or so they thought. As they walked toward the farmhouse in silence, Charles looked at the black substance clinging to his boot. He scraped it with a stick, then brought it to his nose. Oil. Not just any oil. Crude, unrefined, heavy with sediment. Tom pulled out his phone, searching the letters they saw, MLB.co, and a name popped up. Midland Land Boring Company, an oil and gas contractor. One with a long history of environmental violations and unauthorized drilling. It all clicked. The tunnel, the smell, the pipe. Someone had been stealing from beneath Charles' land and doing it in secret. They didn't get far before the second quake hit, but this time it wasn't natural. The ground shuddered with a sharp, violent crack. A deep rumble rolled beneath their feet like underground thunder. Then, boom! A shock wave split the air. Trees at the far edge of the property buckled and collapsed. Smoke poured into the sky, blotting out the morning sun. Charles stood frozen, eyes locked on the rising column of dust. A single red scrap of paper fluttered down, landing at his feet. He picked it up. Letters printed across the corner in bold black font. TNT. Not erosion, not nature, an explosion. Someone was destroying evidence, and Charles had had enough. Fueled by fury, they packed gloves, jars, cameras. They had one goal: get evidence. Real, undeniable proof. Back in the tunnel, the air was worse, hotter, thicker, the hum louder. They found the pipe again, collected oil samples, photographed the walls, the supports, the beams. Then, light. Not flashlight, not sunlight, electrical. They crept forward, hugging the wall, and saw it. A massive industrial machine, rusted but running, pumping oil through tangled pipes. Around it, half a dozen workers in blue jumpsuits moved between panels and gauges, MLB logos on their backs. They were caught red-handed. Charles raised his phone, hand shaking, and took photo after photo. He didn't care if they were seen. Not anymore. They went straight to the sheriff. At first, he didn't believe it, but the photos, the samples, the footage, it was too much to ignore. He made some calls. Within hours, law enforcement arrived at the farm, armed and ready. They descended into the tunnel, guided by Charles and Tom. The workers didn't run, didn't resist. Some even gave names. By sundown, the operation had been exposed. MLB had been drilling illegally beneath multiple properties for years, stealing oil, destabilizing land, and causing underground damage that now threatened rivers, homes, and entire communities. And they had done it quietly. Until now. The arrests came fast and loud. In the weeks that followed, investigators traced the damage. The tunnel network stretched for miles. Much of it was unstable. Several areas had to be sealed and reinforced. Others collapsed entirely. Charles's crops were gone, his fields contaminated. But the government stepped in. Compensation, restoration. Experts brought in to repair the damage and clean the land. The sinkhole was filled, the pipe system removed, the soil tested and treated. For the first time in months, Charles could stand on his porch without the ground beneath him growling. He still didn't trust the silence, but now, at least, he understood it. 1 year later, the land bloomed. The red soil, once tainted with oil and sulfur, had been enriched by mineral runoff. Crops thrived. Beets came in heavier than ever before. Corn shot up like it was chasing the sky. What had once been a battlefield had become fertile again. Nature, relentless and patient, was reclaiming what had been stolen. Charles walked his fields each morning, boots crunching soft earth, the wind tugging at his sleeves. He passed the spot where the sinkhole had been. Now, a grove of young trees stood in its place, but beneath the soil, the memory remained. He paused, looking out across the farmland his family had held for generations. He had saved it, not with guns, not with lawsuits, but by going into the dark and dragging the truth into the light. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss the next cinematic tale. Because sometimes the scariest secrets aren't in the sky above us, but in the ground beneath our feet. Thanks for watching.